Good morning, everyone. Today is September 28th. Sorry, I had to double check that. This is a meeting of the State Street Subcommittee. Excited to dig in again this morning. So Ms. Perea, if we could please start with roll call.
Absolutely. Let's begin. Chair Harmon.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon.
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Present.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And we'll turn it over to Mr. Harris to take us through the preliminary matters.
Certainly. If I can get a hold of my arrow keys here. Let's see here. Apologize for the technical. So preliminary matters, just tightening up our overall agenda and management of the meetings. So have a first item here for any announcements that any of the subcommittee members would like to make or updates. None from staff. We have 3 items on the agenda that we'll present and consistent to the agenda that's been produced. Those items, just for agenda review, we will be having an update on outdoor dining and parklets, an item on interim State Street improvements, which is an item for action. We'll be looking for the subcommittee to make a recommendation. And then a third item is a future of State Street visioning process, an update to the direction that you all gave at our last meeting. And the next item before you all is approval of the minutes. And then we'll take general public comment items that are not on the agenda. And if there's any questions or comments to the minutes, this is for the September 14th, the meeting prior.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Gutierrez, do either of you have any announcements or have any questions or comments on the minutes of our last meeting?
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
and hearing, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Hearing none, I guess we will proceed to vote to approve the meetings. I guess I will move that if there's a second.
I second.
Thank you, Councilmember Gutierrez. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Oh, thank you. Sorry, I'm pressing the mute as I'm talking here. Then I will open it up for general public comment. And just as a reminder, these are for comments not related to items that are specifically agendized for us today. Ms. Perea, do we have anyone who would like to make public comment? These will be 3 minutes today.
Yes, we do. We have 12 attendees total, and of those, 4 are requesting to speak for public comment.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Then let's begin.
Okay, let's start with Richard Clausen. Richard Clausen, go ahead, and you're welcome to start speaking. If you unmute yourself, there you go.
Thank you, Ms. Perea, and it's great to be first on the list of public commenters. First, I want to say thank you for changing the name of the subcommittee. The original name was pretty unwieldy and didn't lend itself to a reasonable acronym, but I think this is much better. And secondly, I subscribe to the email alerts for City Council, HLC, and ABR in addition to yours. But this is the first time I've ever gotten a reminder of the start of a meeting 3 hours early. And because I put meetings into my computer calendar, it's not essential to me, but I think it is a great effort at community engagement. And I thank you to whoever suggested that.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. Next speaker, please.
Okay, next we have Barry Remus. Barry, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself. You'll need to unmute it looks like you're in on a phone connection. If you go ahead and unmute yourself, you should be able to speak. There we go.
Thank you. I didn't realize that by dialing in, I had to still unmute. It hadn't worked for me, worked it pretty well for me before. Good morning. Sorry, Chair Harmon and subcommittee members. It's Barry Remus representing Coast. And I don't believe this is specifically agendized, so that's why I'm speaking now. And it's really good to see that we do have items on the agenda to not only look at the long-term visioning process, but also the interim approaches to State Street and the promenade. And I just wanted to make a recommendation that, especially now that the ordinance has been amended a little bit to extend our promenade hours, I believe now to about 12:30 in the CBD, et cetera. It's looking kind of dark on State Street in certain spots. And so one of the things we would like really to see to encourage more pedestrian activity is to consider putting some type of additional lighting in, especially in certain stretches of the promenade where it does get a little bit dark and possibly ominous. And it's like a little bit of a difference between when cars used to travel the stretch of the street versus now the human and the people activity for bikes and pedestrians. So that's just something to consider. And we look forward to hearing the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Remes. Next speaker, please.
Okay, next speaker is Tamara Erickson. Tamara Erickson, if you unmute yourself.
Good morning, Chair Harmon. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Tamara Erickson, and my family owns the Hotel Santa Barbara building in the 500 block of State. And I don't see on any agenda, past or even this one, any mention of Amplify Music on State Street. And I just would ask that you please consider that as you work forward on your plans. We host hundreds of guests. We've got 75 guest rooms right there in 4 stories, and noise obviously is a great concern because we sell sleep. That's what people are doing for the most part. And so we just like you to keep amplified music and noise on your radar. I am aware that there's a noise ordinance in place, but I'm also aware that it's not always enforced. I think the police have a lot of other really important stuff to do. And so restricting this in advance and just keep being aware that the hotel generates a lot of revenue for the city and is an important partner as you plan would be really helpful. The other thing that I just would ask you to keep on your radar is our pullout there. We have a drop-off that's always been active, and with State Street closed, it's not, and that does hamper our business. And I'm just curious to know, as you plan, how you're planning to address that, and just ask you to please keep the hotel in consideration. We're an important part of downtown. We love downtown, and we want to be a great partner. So thank you so much for the attention that you're spending on this, and we'll be anxious to see what you come up with.
Thank you for those comments, Ms. Erickson. Ms. Perea, I think you said there's one more speaker.
Yes, there is, and that's Anna Gott. And it looks like she still needs to connect with her audio. So Anna Gott, if you are available on audio, you're welcome to start speaking. It looks like she needs to, it says she needs to click and enter her PIN. So I think she's in the process of getting connected to audio.
Okay. Well, let's just give 30 more seconds and see. I know there's some technical challenges sometimes, and if she's not able to connect, hopefully she can communicate her comments to us via email. Just give a couple more seconds there.
Okay, Anna Gott, if you're able to connect, please go ahead and speak.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Scott, please feel free to send us an email with your comments. We look forward to hearing from you. Now, I would like us to, that closes public comment. If we could please move to the first agenda item, which is an update on outdoor dining and parklets. I believe this is Mr. Harris. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and I'm going the wrong direction. Item A, temporary outdoor dining and parklets. I will introduce this item, give an overview, and then ask Mr. Dayton to join as his work group is intensely involved in this work effort. As this subcommittee and council is aware through the adoption of the emergency.
Am I able to give my public comment now?
Miss
Hi.
Scott,
Hi.
we were having some technical issues. I think we can hear you now. We'll go back to the timer screen. Sorry about that. All right, please go ahead.
Thank you. I don't know why you couldn't hear me before when I was saying hello. Anyways, I watched the De La Guerra meeting the other day, and I'm concerned about it for a few issues, not the least of which is that we are in a constant drought and will be for some time. I wanted to make a mention that in Torrance, California, they just put in a splash pad. It doesn't work all the time because of the waste that's actually in the water. The filtration system keeps shutting down. That system alone was $1.5 million. And no one is discussing that issue. And that issue actually is all over the United States, where homeless people use splash pads to shower because they don't have access to a shower. They do their laundry and use it for other personal, hygiene. Other cities actually have to create task force after splash pads are put in and spend money on a daily basis to have attendants actually inside of the area to make sure that no one is using it for any other reason. They have to create ordinances after the fact to make sure that children are the only ones that are allowed in the splash pad areas. So I don't know that anyone is really talking about this issue, and it's a substantial problem. There's also someone that mentioned noise, on State Street. An alcohol ordinance would actually allow us to have someone on State Street that would look at noise at night and be there to make sure that we weren't having anything happen. That wouldn't pull money away from the police officers, because we would actually have money dedicated from an alcohol ordinance for a police officer to monitor things like that. So you wouldn't have noises disturbing hotel guests, which will have two hotels on State Street in the 500 block now, that another one is being approved, as well as residents in the future.
I think you got cut off there, Ms. Scott, but thank you very much for those comments. And I would encourage you and anyone else who's watching to tune in to our De La Guerra Plaza subcommittee as well. Certainly these are interconnected processes. So really appreciate the feedback on both efforts. So we'll go back to, that closes public comment officially now, and we'll go back to Mr. Harris giving us an update on outdoor dining in parklets. Thanks, Mr. Harris.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Chair Harmon. Thank you for the introduction. So back to item A, update to outdoor dining and parklets. I'll have Mr. Rob Dayton join here and add to this presentation. But as I was commenting earlier, we have the temporary outdoor dining in the parklets, which is really the extension of the sidewalk, the small platforms built into the streets, be it an on-street parking space, or in the case of State Street, which is closed, but within the street area. We initially produced guidelines earlier this summer when the ordinance and activity was allowed. And with the current extension of the emergency ordinance till December 8th, with a possible extension for 3 months till March 8th, 2021, there's a recognition and realization that we could be seeing these outdoor dining and outdoor business activities extend through the winter season. We've had numerous interest and questions of inquiry from businesses of how can they go about protecting and updating their spaces for rainfall and colder weather, the winterizing as we refer to that. So as such, the parklet guidelines are being updated dramatically, will be released here early this week that will be addressing those points. And what we will see in subsequent activity is Public Works and Fire Department staff will be making field inspections as these parklets are modified for winter. And this is a combination of either adding some form of tents or canopies to keep potential rainfall and or wind and just general better comfort, as well as the potential use of heaters. And then a more substantive but kind of a less known issue is just stormfall. This is the water coming off of a heavy rainflow, which is falling down the curb line, the gutter area. And there are certain sections of streets and roadways that have a tendency to pool water and or flood. And so we'll be making those inspections, engaging property owners to modify those parklets to address that. And then as always, we work in tandem with our city attorney's office for potential enforcement if necessary. So with that, I'd just again introduce Mr. Rob Dayton to add any other details or refinements that I might not have spoken to.
Well, you can go to the next slide. I think I'd just be repeating you, Jason, but I think it's really cool that that our staff has done guidelines. The picture that's shown, well, I guess it's not there anymore. The picture that's shown on the slide shows that we've updated the guidelines again and again. Initially, when we had guidelines on here, we were only showing examples in other cities, and now it's all examples from our own parklets and whatnot. What I will add is that the accessibility committee has been pretty frustrated with the ADA compliance on the parklets and on State Street, and it's our intention to actually inspect them with a checklist, and that for those people who do not comply with the ADA guidelines, which are spelled out very clearly, will receive enforcement from the attorney's office. So I think that's a really important part of this. And then how we're putting the notice out, we're putting the notice out of the updated guidelines and the extension. We're going to do a couple things. We're going to be giving it directly to every location, but then we'll also post it on a number of city outlets so that everyone's aware that there's a shift to pay attention to. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. And with that, we'll take any questions, comments from the subcommittee members on this item before entering into public comment.
Thank you very much to you both. Any questions from either of my colleagues? Mayor Pro Tem Snedden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is this a time to ask, is there, in the staff report, it talks about the sidewalk being for pedestrians and the street part being for bicycles and temporary bike lanes. Is this the time to ask about that, or is that coming?
My understanding is that's item B. Is that correct, Mr.
Okay.
Harris?
Well, I think there's a combination. I would say we would take comment and inquiry on all of these items in relation to these activities. I think if there's any feedback or questions in context to the current activities of outdoor dining and parklets, be it on the sidewalk or private property on State Street, we'll take that feedback and direction and questions now.
Okay, so thank you, Madam Chair. Then I have a couple questions. So one is about, so when restaurants go to 25% capacity, it seems to be that will, our indoor capacity that seems to be on the horizon. Will that affect how many tables and chairs we're allowing outside?
We are not expecting to modify the guidelines in context to operational configurations at this point in time. It's, as we all know, through the tiered reopening of the economy of the public health orders, we'll go to 25% in the red tier, which is the possibility of happening as early as this week, still pending to that notice. And then subsequently, there will be another, the next tier, again, through a multi-week waiting period, waiting to see how the public health guidelines are being met, potentially could enter into the next tier, which would be a 50% occupancy. Staff is evaluating this balance of the level of outdoor, temporary outdoor dining and parklet activity that we have. And the configurations and locations kind of vary throughout the city. And so I think this is one that we're monitoring closely, and ultimately there will be kind of a policy decision as to either the availability of space, the amount of space that can be utilized. The guidelines do speak to this, but we've also been working in the field and coordinating appropriately with businesses the function. That being said, we've also received comment and complaint that we've been following up on locations where businesses may be not adhering to the guidelines by either not establishing physical boundaries for sidewalk dining or even outdoor dining on a street area, and or not allowing a sufficient path of travel, which is also another requirement. So we do those notices directly to those businesses, and if as referenced earlier by Mr. Dayton, if there's repeated offenses, then ultimately the business's ability to use the right of way can be revoked. And so it's kind of a constant tug and pull of processes as we hear of complaints or visually, then we obviously do the appropriate follow-up, and then if there's these repeat offenses, we make action.
Thank you. And then when canopies, I guess we're in the development part of that, but with canopies or tents or structures, are those expected to be on both the sidewalk and street, or just in the street portion, or just the sidewalk portion, or does it depend on the businesses?
It really does depend on the business. I mean, there is a functional aspect of these of the mechanics of how these businesses may want to. They cannot enclose. That's one of the highlights of this 10. If they do put a roof type of covering, they per public health directives can only have one side closed. They can't enclose any more than one side. They can enclose all sides, but then they cannot have a roof element. And in any configuration, any kind of canopy structure, it needs to be flame retardant, and that's one of the aspects that the fire department would be making field inspections to be verifying.
Okay, thank you. And then obviously that takes into account the heat lamps and the placement of those, and so
correct.
The footprint. Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions for now. I think I'll have more questions about the bike lanes after we have item B. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Gutierrez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is regarding the environmental impacts of the parklets and the new proposed redesigns of how to deal with the water runoff when it rains. Have you all been discussing that, and whether or not some materials would be allowed versus others because of the environmental impacts?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Gutierrez, are you referring to the environmental impacts of the water being blocked, or the environmental impacts of perhaps contamination of the water?
Both.
Okay. I don't think we've talked a lot about contamination. I'm not sure if there'd be any materials that would contaminate the water flow or storm flow. The main concern we're doing with the guidelines is we're ensuring, we're saying, hey, council just extended this. The first phase was not intended to be during winter. And and on top of that, some of you ignored the guidelines that say keep the water flow in the gutter that we already had in there. So we just want you to know this is on you. If you choose to ignore this and there's damage, it's on you. That's the primary goal for the city attorney. And then we, so that's the stick. The carrot is we're going to be walking around out there and really pointing out the ones that are obvious. It's pretty clear. If you see a board across eclipsing the flow of water, that's a problem. And then the better versions are where if they did put a platform, it's on top of the curb with an ADA ramp. That's a better. And then there's some in between where they might have a stanchion post supporting in the gutter, but then it's largely open. So there's a combination of the way people have handled it. So carrot and stick. Carrot, you're responsible. or the stick is you're responsible, then we're going to go out one by one and say, hey, this really is not going to work if there's a storm.
So is there going to be, thank you, Mr. Dane, is there going to be a set formula for them to follow, or is it just going to be you all walking by, making sure there's a clear path for the water to go by? Like, are you going to require grates for the water to go by to stop any kind of blockage that could happen underneath the platforms or anything like that?
Councilmember Harmon and Councilmember Gutierrez. So the guidelines talk about having the gutter be free and clear. So that's what we're looking for, and so that storm flow is not blocked. Some of our, particularly on State Street, there is not a storm drain system until you get down to Ortega. So it's all happening in the street, and depending upon the size of the storm, it can be a pretty big flow. So we just want everyone to understand that they've got to, if they're blocking that flow, that's going to be a challenge during those times, and they need to take responsibility for it. And then we're going to hold their hand a bit and say, hey, this one doesn't comply. And that's what that checklist is about. The other thing we're doing is that we're requiring that every single business adds the city of Santa Barbara to their insurance for the public right of way. So that's just a naming. It doesn't cost anymore. Most businesses, as we found, they are getting insurance. They have to have insurance for the business forever they operate. They have to have insurance for. So just adding the city of Santa Barbara is a kind of a low barrier way so that we can still get the activities we want for to save their business, but then also give some sort of protection to the city. So that's also being done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And that answered my question about insurance. So thank you to my colleagues and to staff. I would like to now open it up for public comment if we have anyone that wishes to speak related to outdoor dining and parklets specifically. Ms. Perea, is there anyone with their hand raised?
Yes, we have Anna Gott. Anna Gott, go ahead and speak, please.
Awesome.
Good morning. So I wonder if the only reason we're requiring insurance now, but can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
can you
we can
restart it because I got really confused. No one acknowledged me. Good morning. So I really would like to know if the reason we're asking for insurance now is because someone got stabbed in the 500 block last week. I've asked about insurance before. This started with outdoor dining over a year ago, and we were not actually ensuring that we had insurance for any of the outside dining. We then didn't actually make that a requirement when you pass the emergency ordinance. I just want to say that, these guidelines have had no review by HLC for anything, and we seem to be giving people a mixed message. Go ahead and put up a parklet, but then now we're not going to really go and look at any of the dimensions. We're not going to look at storm water. And then now, all of a sudden, we are going to go back and look at storm water, and we're going to actively patrol. But we have ambassadors that are actively patrolling every single day, and we're not telling people where they should have their tables and where they can't, and make sure that there is access for people on the sidewalk. Did you know that last Friday, just before the stabbing, the fire marshal was out measuring the width of the 500 block? I want to know how we actually got a fire truck down the 500 block at 10 or 11 o'clock at night with a whole bunch of people in the middle of the street and with the barriers that we have on CODA. He should actually be at tomorrow's city council meeting explaining the great or poor access he had. Regarding the tent, I would like to see it somewhere, where the public health officers that actually has written notification that you can have 4 sides without a roof, because it seems to actually contain all of the air in one tent and not actually encourage airflow, which is what we need to prevent the virus. So, and the last thing, we've got ongoing issues with bikes on the sidewalk and in the streets and the conflict with the pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Ms. Perea, is there any other comments?
Yes, we have Richard Clausen. Richard Clausen, go ahead and unmute yourself. You're welcome to speak for 2 minutes.
Thanks very much, Chair Harmon. Earlier in the discussion, Councilwoman Snedden mentioned a staff report on this topic, and I'm unaware of that, and I was wondering, I know you can't respond to me, but if that could be, if the URL for that, if it's online, could be made publicly available, I think many of us would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. I'll ask Mr. Harris to speak to that. I know we've been having a little bit of technical trouble getting this all set up and running. I think these are online. Is that correct, Mr. Harris?
So the staff report being alluded to, it was not a staff report submitted to this committee meeting. It was provided to the subcommittee members as informational. It's a draft document that we can speak to on item C, which is the future of State Street visioning process. And that again was a draft staff report that would be sent to the boards, commissions, stakeholder committee organizations as we seek to have them agendize the discussion with staff on the future of State Street visioning process. And we're happy to load that to the this subcommittee website upon this committee's review and discussion today.
Great, thank you, Mr. Harris. Ms. Perea, any more public comments?
No, there are no more.
Great, thank you. That closes public comment on this item, outdoor dining and parklets. And I want to just give my colleagues an opportunity to comment on this issue. Of course, if you would like to save all your comments till the end, that's fine too. But if either Mayor Pro Tem or Councilmember Gutierrez have something they want to comment specifically related to dining and parklets, now would be a good opportunity to do so. Mr. Gutierrez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to emphasize again that what has me a little concerned is the materials that the parklets are made out of, and if we're going to have rain and flooding potentially on State Street, and that material is going to be soaked and then carried into our storm gutters. I just know that a lot of that material is treated with toxic chemicals, so that's my only concern as of right now that wasn't addressed already by staff. But yeah, just if we can look into that a bit more.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think just a couple on this, on the tenting or on the, whatever, not the tenting, but the structure. I know we're continuing to look at the ADA and the pathways and how people can walk, but I just have questions and concern about if it becomes now a more defined block enclosed by the poles of whatever the structure is, that the impediment to flow for ADA, for pedestrians, and I think we will talk about it more in item B, but if we're just talking about the canopy structures, the flow of pedestrian traffic and ADA and then also bicycles, I think. And then also, I don't know if this is maybe a policy question, but and something to discuss, but as more and more indoor dining is allowed, I'm wondering if we can then pull back some of the outdoor so it's not spilling out quite so far into towards the center line, you know, that we could just have a sort of pulling back in. And I don't know if that's something we discussed as a group or subcommittee, but or whether staff is already sort of looking at that. But I think as the indoor dining can expand, I think it's so great having the outdoor part, but I think it's a little much. It's a little far out there, which we're accommodating because the indoor spaces aren't accessible. But if as those fill in, if we might be able to pull that back a little bit, and that might be a further discussion, but I just want to mention that now.
So Chair Harmon and Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon, just on the path of travel, that's going to be an ADA issue that we will be enforcing. We have seen that too. So whether the space is enclosed or not, we will be writing up, leaving a slip saying you didn't meet it. And if we go back the next time and they haven't, we're going to hand that over to the city's attorney's office to address. And then on the,
So do people have to walk, like if a canopy structure goes over the whole outdoor seating area and it includes sort of the thoroughfare that people are walking, will people walking on the street have to go under that canopy as well? So that they're
no,
sort of, okay.
no, the canopy is not, they're not permitted in the public area where you're walking. It's just only over
That's my question. Thank you.
And then the other issue about how far people can go, I think that's a really good question, and I think that Mr. Harris and I need to think about how to work with the subcommittee on a recommendation for what we would call the interim standards. What we're doing now, just so everyone knows, it's really important. The center line is not the orange and black line in the street. The center line is actually the distance halfway between the curb and gutter. So you can't see it unless you measure it, and it varies because at the mid-block across the street is narrower, and at the signals it's wider because it includes the right turn pocket. So it may appear that some businesses are encroaching more than they're allowed to. Most of them aren't. Most of them are following the guideline, but there are some. If they, for instance, M Special just went in on the 600 block, and there's no opposing restaurant on the other side, so we let them come over. I think it's just a matter of 2 feet, but I think that is a good question that we need to bring to the subcommittee. That what is the expectation for the interim if the temporary is to continue in some form to the future, so we'll look for an opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I agree. That would be a good conversation for us to have. And I only just wanted to add very briefly, Mr. Dayton, I think you touched on it in your response to Mayor Pro Tem. I would just like for us to clarify when we communicate with businesses what the enforcement process is like, how many warnings they can receive before it's turned over to the city attorney's office. If we can just have, we don't necessarily need to discuss it now. I think you said it would be one and then go to the city attorney. That's reasonable. I just want to make sure that folks are really clear that this is not going to be, it's not sort of a wobbly, however many warnings we happen to give. I think it's really important that we set expectations about how many notices they can get before it becomes an enforcement action. So I just want to make sure that we're clear, because I know we will be with businesses, what the expectations are in terms of compliance and how many chances, I guess, they'll get to get it right. So thank you very much. And with that, we can move on to item B, interim state street improvements.
Very good. Just advancing the slides here. There we go. So with this, I will introduce Mr. Dayton to speak to these items. He's been closely monitoring, as being referenced in the conversation today, the activity, the behavior of pedestrian and cyclists, and then as we have been discussing, this transition from the temporary that was established over the summer, of which then with the extension of the emergency ordinance is now transitioning to interim, a period that's a little longer in duration. And so as such, a recognition that the activity collectively is here for a period longer than short term, and as such, the various efforts to improve and enhance the experience that's been created. So with that, Mr. Dayton.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, and Madam Chair and committee members. So the purpose or the goal of the interim state street improvements is to create more organization of users and to have less of a construction feel. One of the things that we like to talk about is right now we're in the temporary ordinance. There's been a lot of discussion, and staff is feeling that the council and the community are interested in keeping State Street closed in some form or another. So we're looking for the next term that wouldn't be temporary, it would be interim. And then, of course, the purpose of this committee is to envision that future, perhaps a project that would actually be a construction project that would transform this, the street to something else. So what does that interim look like, and what can we do now to help it? So next slide. Right now, what we have out there is more of a construction feel, and the purpose of these improvements that we're going to talk about, that we'd actually love to have you make a recommendation to council on and bring them to city council because they have a price tag, is that there's been a lot of discussion about bikes and peds and the conflict. We'd like to clarify that a bit, see if we can do something to make it more defined where the bikes go, where the pedestrians go, minimize some conflict. And then so we have some markings on State Street for some semblance of a bike path, and then additional lighting and activities that we would put on the street. There's been even one of the public commenters today mentioned about lighting, so we have some thoughts about that. Next slide. Right now, when you look at the street, this was appropriate maybe on day one, the first Friday. We closed the street to automobiles and opened it to pedestrians. It's very construction feel. We did try to add some plants to make it, to soften the feel, and also to add some protection from speeding vehicles, but it's largely kind of a construction feel. So next slide will show you that same intersection at Danapamu, and this would be what we're looking to do for each of the intersections except for Carrillo. And what it is the red, and you'll see in a moment, I've got a picture, the larger red dots are a very large potted plant. The smaller dots are a bollard that is PVC but looks like iron, so it's a little bit more of a better look. And then what you'll see is on the green.
Sorry.
What you'll see, okay.
There we go.
Just go back to the intersection diagram, that'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Harris. So on the green, approaching 50 feet in front of the intersection and 50 feet on the other side of the intersection, we start to say, okay, all people, you're coming to an intersection. This is where the bikes go. The bikes go on the green. We'd actually paint the street as green. We put the symbols down, and then we would sign at the head of those two places. As you're on approach to the intersection, we would sign pedestrians go to the intersections, bikes channelize on the green. So it would be very, very clear where the pedestrians and bikes are supposed to go. And what we like to say is it resets each block. It kind of resets everybody. So pedestrians kind of starting on the crosswalks can move into the street, and bikes continuing on the street. The skip track in the middle is just a guide for bikes to know, hey, you're coming across the street. It's a guide for motorists to see where bicycles are going. And then the other thing that's really important is at these pots, you'll notice that the pots are they're not located behind the crosswalk. They're actually located in the intersection. And that's been really important to the traffic engineer, that when motorists are coming on either side of State Street, that they would actually have a visual cue, very, very aware that there's these pots, that there's something different going on. We've got to adjust our behavior to go slow. So if we look at the next slide, you'll begin to see, I think it's the other direction right there. Okay. If you look at the next slide, this is those pots. These pots actually are the actual pots we've got 3 of them out on Coast Village Road. They're 5 feet across at the top, about 3 feet high, and they would be replanted with flowers or something that's nice, kind of looks. They're plastic, so they're not actually terracotta, but they look terracotta. And so it is more of an interim feel, not a permanent. We're not trying to create the permanence here. We're just trying to dress it up a bit and have some guidance. And then you'll see the bollards, which are actually plastic. They look iron, so they're nice. They have a nice reflective strip on the side. And then I'll also call attention to, we did a a trial experiment on lighting. If you look up above from the light post stanchion to light post stanchion, we put at the intersection of Bannapamu. Last week we put up these lights. These actually we took to HLC, so the HLC has seen the covers. This is something they asked for. They asked for lighting that had covers. So we're proposing to put these on this block, the 1100 block, the one you're looking at, and the one behind us, which is the 1200 block. And then we're proposing to put some experimental lighting along the sides as you go down, so every block would have more lighting. Next slide. And then, so finally, this does have a price tag. It requires us to purchase about 52 of these pots and a number of bollards. It also requires the planting and maintenance of the pots in the interim period. So we've got a maintenance number included in that. And we're asking that this subcommittee recommend to City Council moving forward with this intersection specific design for the intersections on State Street for not to exceed an amount of $200,000. We're proposing that money come from Measure C to fund that. And that concludes my presentation. Would love to answer any questions you have about what we're thinking.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dayton. Do either of my colleagues have questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. The lights are great, I think, for now, especially for interim. And my question is, so the figure that you were showing there, that was the 1100 block with the green bike lanes down the center. And I think, I mean, that looks like it would work fine there. And that photograph is sort of not a lot of people, looks very spacious. Those same images we've seen of the 500 block, where pedestrians are in the center of the street. There's not 6 foot clearance even close. Pedestrians along the sidewalk. Also, I'm not able to visualize, or can you help me, I guess is the question, visualize how this works, say on the 500 block. It looks so spacious in this image here in front of us, and I know it's not further down. And then to Ms. Scott's question, how do fire trucks, so here, once we put up these barriers, how do fire trucks ingress, egress, and that question of that? But mainly if these, say for the 500 block, how does this play out for pedestrians being able to have space away from diners and being able to walk without having to go into closer proximity?
Chair Harmon, Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon, that's a really good question. So the 500 block, we wouldn't recommend that approach. The 500 block would remain. The council's ordinance is walk your bike only, so there's no need to direct bikes in like they're going to ride. I think that would be cross purpose. And you're right, I think that 500 block is going to be an interesting nut to crack in the future, but for the interim, I think we've got a good solution that I think will probably continue. And then on your second question about the fire department, actually, if we look back at that picture, Mr. Harris, if you could put it back up, there's a, in between the pots, and by the way, this is designed to say no to vehicles, you know, in kind of a strongest sense, the vehicles that this is closed without having a road closed sign, you know, which is the goal. We don't want it to look like a construction project. It needs to look somewhat, you know, interim. So that post that's in the middle has a magnetic piece that tool that can be given to the folks that are regularly going in and out. So for instance, there is a truck that takes the grease traps from the restaurants, has to access because they have a snorkel that they have to bring in the doorway and actually take the grease out. There are a number of other people who have to access State Street on a regular basis. They would have that key to unhook that middle post. And then the fire department, in emergency situation, the pots, it's wide enough for them to get through. So they have to swing wide. That's a little bit more than 14 feet in between those pots, which is the clearance we're asking for the entire street. And they would just, in an emergency, they would just go over that post, which is flexible and can bend and can be replaced. in an emergency situation.
Thank you very much for that. And then one more quick question about, is there a speed limit, or are motorized bicycles allowed in this area, or are those not recommended, or how do we control that or influence that, I guess?
Excellent question. So Chair Harmon and Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon, motorized bicycles are becoming extremely popular. Much faster than I thought it would ever happen. So it's becoming a mode of choice, and that's actually increasing the amount of people in Santa Barbara who ride, which can help traffic. That's the goal of us enhancing cyclists moving for transportation, is to guard against congestion. So yes, they would be allowed to continue to permit on the street. You know, the staff has discussed this extensively. We're very concerned about safety on State Street and the mix of modes. We have not proposed painting a pathway the whole way, because we do think that that would be more dangerous, mainly because the pedestrian is not really aware of paths. They don't signal their intentions. They don't go, hey, I'm going right. You know, pedestrians tend to be top of mind and just go where they can. So what we're saying in the middle of the block is to cyclists is, cyclists, you have the responsibility to watch out for pedestrians and to go slow. And we see pedestrians or bicyclists responding to crowds and really adjusting their behavior, even on motorized bikes, which can, most of them are pedal assist, so you just pedal slower and you're going slower.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gutierrez, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, they were just covered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just have one quick one, Mr. Dayton, just picking up where Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon left off on that last point. I know we've had a lot of communication from folks about the dynamic between the different modes of transportation down State Street, the pedestrian and the cyclist. Can you, if we could go back to the slide of that picture, I'm just wondering if you, or maybe if our traffic folks are on the line, can you describe for us a little bit more, will this innovation, I guess is the word for it, will this help to sort of ameliorate some of the challenges in that respect, or is this specifically related to vehicles going the other way, or what can we expect in terms of how this will impact the relationship between cyclists and pedestrians?
Chair Harmon, I was just looking to see if Derek Bailey was going to be on, and Ms. Brea, if you see him, if you could upgrade him. I know he's monitoring the call. So yes, in the answer to your question, yes, this is intended to address the issue we're hearing quite frequently of the conflict between pedestrians and bikes. And we, you know, there's no panacea until we get to the final design and really decide what that looks like, and we're not there. So we're trying to do the safest thing we can do in this interim solution. So the concept is we're resetting every intersection. We're resetting positioning where everyone is. And at the, Mr. Harris, if you could just point to the end of that path, right to the end of that path, right there at the end. So as you're coming towards it, it'll actually say pedestrians this way, bikes this way. So even if a pedestrian doesn't listen, because, you know, I mean, we're not going to have a police officer saying, hey, you know, don't step on the green. So that could happen. At least we'll eliminate the confusion, because right now we hear confusion about where everyone's supposed to be. So at least at the intersection, it'll be very clear where everyone's supposed to be. And then again, when you get past this intersection, hopefully we see some resetting, pedestrians staying on the sidewalk more, or at least like, you know, I felt better on the sidewalk. I feel better on the sidewalk than mixing with bikes. I think I'll just stay here. So that's the hope and thought in kind of the resetting every intersection.
Awesome, thank you so much. With that, I think unless there are any further questions from my colleagues, we'll open this up to public comment. Ms. Brea, is there anyone that wishes to speak on this item?
Yes, we have two people who would like to speak. The first is Anna Gott.
Great, Ms. Scott?
Anna Gott, go ahead and speak, please.
Good morning. I'm concerned about the funds from Measure C being used for temporary structures and lighting. Seems to be a misuse of that money, and I think that the public really did not understand that we would be using money like this. Regarding lighting, we have lighting on State Street in the holidays. We wrap trees in lighting. I don't think we need to buy additional lighting considering the amount of lights that we put down State Street on those trees. We could just leave those up for an extended period of time. Regarding, State Street and re-envisioning it, San Francisco is mandating telework in the future for a certain number of days, and they want to make it permanent. We're not even talking about that, and we're not talking about reducing the amount of commercial square footage on State Street and actually incentivizing, while we're incentivizing the housing. So we should really be looking at permanent teleworking for a lot of businesses, and we should be looking at making sure that we reduce the amount of square footage for commercial space. On slide 15, if we want to go to that, the painting on the intersection, again, I don't think anything's going to be reset because you're going to have to add a ton of signage. Pedestrians do not actually look at the signage that we've got now. They walk all over the place. And I don't believe that without a tremendous amount of signage and maybe even attendance there, that you're actually going to be able to get the pedestrians not to go in the middle of the street right through those green areas. The last thing I just want to, mention is I don't think we really have the public, responding to the charrettes, because we seem to have a lot of people in the industry of developers and architects versus the people that actually go down to State Street. We don't seem to be targeting those individuals and the ones that are just avoiding it completely right now because of the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Richard Clausen. Richard Clausen, go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Thank you very much, Chair Harmon. And thank you to Mr. Dayton for showing that image with the lights strung across State Street from pole to pole. He'll remember that a lighting on State Street in the EPV was presented to HLC probably more than a year ago, and it was a disaster. Staff was so ill prepared, and they brought a concept that had string lights, bare bulb string lights, and it was very Disneyland. And I'm happy to see that the hooded lamps that minimize uplighting to the upper stories of hotels has been incorporated. I look forward to seeing future iterations of that as to whether they will continue mid-block from curb to curb, or whether the intent or the concept is that lighting will follow the curb down along the sidewalk, that sort of thing. But I think that lighting could be good, but it has to be good lighting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clausen. Any more speakers, Ms. Perea?
Yes, Barry Remis would also like to speak. So
please go ahead.
If you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself. Barry Remis, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you.
There we go.
Oops. Thank you. I did unclick it, but we're getting some, I think maybe the technical things challenges this. Thank you again, Chair Harmon and subcommittee members. Barry Remis with Coast. This is really heartening to see the interim approach that our transportation team has come up with. And I think this is a really good step in the right direction to be able to try to bring a little bit more parity, if we want to call it that, to the promenade. especially in the intersection areas. And it'll be interesting to see how this reset concept works. Hopefully it will be successful. We realize, of course, that, and rightfully so, pedestrians really, this is a promenade, and pedestrians, have the right to be able to walk where they wish. However, if they do see a green lane, which would be fantastic to finally see in Santa Barbara, that where bicyclists belong, generally speaking, and hopefully our bicyclists will adhere to that through the full stretch of the promenade, that hopefully that will keep the order of users, as the slide mentioned. So while perhaps, and that's the tricky thing here, we are talking about an interim situation. And while, and it obviously, has fiscal consequences, or, fiscal matters that we need to consider. So we can't be throwing tons of money at this. And in the future, based on the way that the public responds to outreach, which we know will happen, further fiscal decisions can be made for the long term. Regarding the lighting, and Ms. Scott brings up an interesting point about the trees wrapped for the holidays. They are a very good aesthetic and something that, does provide a festive atmosphere. But I think the primary goal here is for public safety, especially with more people going to be in the street, biking and walking without vehicles. The element of public safety is more paramount. So I think the idea of brighter lighting, but lighting that fits within our El Pueblo Viejo standards, that the agency will have purview over, really is probably the better thing to look at. And I think it is an appropriate use of the funds. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Remis. Ms. Perea, any more comments?
No more speakers.
Thank you very much. So I will open this up to my colleagues for discussion, and I would just remind all of us that I think we're looking, if we so agree, to make a motion as to whether or not to recommend that these interim improvements be put to City Council. So Mr. Gutierrez, I'll start with you, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, as we are all aware, that the pedestrian and bicycle safety on State Street as it is now is becoming more and more of a priority. So I think what staff is recommending is a good recommendation, and I'd like to make a motion to pass it. Somebody's microphone is on.
Yeah, could you please mute yourselves if you're not speaking? Thank you. There's some wind. Thank you. Could you repeat that, Councilmember Gutierrez? Great. Mayor Pro Tem?
I'll second Councilmember Gutierrez's motion to recommend for the amount. And then I think it would be a good idea for the lighting, even though it is interim, it'd be great to just run that by HLC for maybe they have a further recommendation or something, not to be held up too long. We do need the lighting, but there may be some further input that they could provide, because it is a expense and they're likely to be there beyond interim or for a while. And I would feel comfortable if that was an additional part of the conversation, but not to hold it up, but just here's a chance for input, give some input, and then to move forward with that. And I think I'll be interested in how the bike lanes play out. I think it's really important that we have access for both pedestrians to move freely. I'm a little bit concerned about pedestrians getting too herded together and not feeling that they have the social distance. And so maybe with the bike lanes narrower, but I trust our transportation department to work that out, what's best there. But the paint, I'm assuming, is sort of temporary, like without too much effort, it can be removed or restriped, if I could ask that.
Mr. Dayton?
Yeah.
Yes, Chair Harmon and Mayor Pro Tem Sten, we can, it's just it's not the kind of permanent thermoplastic that we put down. So it is only for a temporary. And then the other thing I wanted to comment on, or just to talk to you about, we really do respect the Historic Landmarks Commission and their role in this. If you do require us to go to that, I can pretty much guarantee that the lights will not be up we're planning on trying to put them up in the next 2 weeks. If we go to the Historic Landmarks Commission for comments, it would probably be a month. And then if they don't like what we propose them, then it will be a lot longer. So I just want you to be aware that if you choose that path, we will not see the lights go up fast. And then the other thing is that you might be interested to know, and I'm sorry I didn't say this, but the commenters said, some of the commenters talked about the lights around the trees, and those will be we'll start to put those up on November 1st. And so it takes some time to put those up, but they are going up starting November 1st.
Then can I ask a follow-up question about the string lights? So the ones that you have that are shown here that are proposed, they've gone through some type of commenting from HLC, and that's why they have the covers on them. Okay, I think that's okay, as long as when we're looking at long-term, we'll have to be more careful about the selection of lighting for the long term on that.
And to clarify, yes, as Mr. Lawson pointed out, we did take we went to them and showed them the string lights that he referred to as a kind of the pilot project that we did on the 500 block during the experiment weekend, you might recall. And then the lights that you see there with the copper domes or whatever that's called, shades. Those are the ones that HLC was leaning toward. Now, we didn't get an approval, but those are the ones they really liked. So we haven't got, they're not formally approved, but we think that we got far enough that we thought we just buy a portion of them. They're much more expensive than string lights. The rest of the lights down the from pole to pole parallel to the street, we're thinking that we would do as a temporary light or an interim light, again, to just get more light on the street since there's so many people in the street. And that will, we're confident that HLC would probably not approve those. So I think that to the subcommittee, the question is, would you like us to do those at the lower cost, or do you want us to try to move into a Historic Landmarks Commission process where we can actually get a formal approval so that we're not spending money in a direction that they don't like? And then the other comment on that, as you're thinking about that, is that we probably would start moving into some permanent design, which would change everything, possibly even the type of lights we have on State Street from a standard, from the light standard standpoint. So it's just an unknown territory. So we're trying to be as interim as possible and not spend money where we're going to have to do something different that HLC does want and should be appropriate or will be appropriate on the street because we have their good guidance.
Well, I'll say now from my perspective, for interim, I think it's okay to move forward. I just want to really emphasize that when we move, if we move to more permanent, that we really not short circuit that process. It does take a long time. Their input is very valuable. We all know that. And I think especially in EPV and State Street, I mean, this is the spine and the gem in our community. I think it's worth taking that time. But for now, in the interim, I'm okay with the lights as proposed here. And I think it's great. We really need to get lighting going. So I don't want to hold that up. But for when we're looking long term, I won't want to truncate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I completely agree. I think when we get to the permanent conversation, it's imperative that we engage with our design boards, HLC obviously, but this is a safety issue, as we've heard from public commenters, as those of us who've spent time on State Street understand, and we've heard from staff. So I agree with my colleagues that we should move forward with the interim lighting, and I also agree that this is a great solution. I also just want to express my appreciation. This has been a learning process for all of us. This happened quickly, and we've been responding to the needs as we come to know them and as we come to understand them. So I'm really excited that we're starting to sort of put some of the expertise we've gained over the last few months into practice and put some of these fixes, even in an interim way, in place. I think it's really going to enrich the experience of being on State Street, whether you're a pedestrian or a cyclist. So I'm very excited. So I think, Ms. Perea, we should do a roll call vote on this because we may be sending it to council. And I believe the motion was by Councilmember Gutierrez, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem, to recommend to the full City Council that we authorize the purchase of these interim improvements for State Street. So with that, if we can please take a roll call vote, Ms. Perea.
Okay, let's start with Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon,
Yes.
Councilmember Gutierrez,
Aye.
and Chair Harmon.
Yes, great,
Okay,
and that's
it's
unanimous. Perfect. Thank you very much. And with that, we will go to the third and final item on our agenda today, and that's in connection with the future of State Street visioning process. Mr. Harris.
Good, great, thank you all. So for future State Street, we have been discussing really the temporary and interim conditions and kind of the day-to-day management of the public space. These outdoor dining spaces, obviously State Street is the function. But we're now setting forth, and from our last meeting on September 14th, the subcommittee gave direction and approved authorization for a formal visioning process to commence. And so this item is to check in with you all. It's only been 2 weeks, but we've got a lot of activity going. As referenced, there is a draft staff report that is being prepared. It was sent to the subcommittee to review, and I'll highlight in the next slides the questions that we would be posing to the commissions and the stakeholder organizations, and to a certain extent to the community, the public, when we go out with survey process. And we'll be engaging residents that are not frequenting downtown and want to be gauging their interest as well. So overall, as we go through this process, the visioning is what we're wanting to gather feedback and input for really the future of State Street. How everyone idealizes and envisions their experiences into the future, and the types of activities they would be able to enjoy, and then what are the feelings, what are the sentiments that would either attract them to come and engage in this new public space, and the feelings that they would have while they were there, and then even in subsequent reflection. As we referenced, we'll be meeting with 10 commissions and in committee and a number of stakeholder organizations. And then concurrent, obviously maybe slightly delayed as we get the survey up and going, but we'll be having a public outreach process throughout the fall, throughout this overall effort. We'll be taking all of that collective input and synthesizing this into themes of the collective information gathered, and then we'll be bringing that back to the subcommittee for evaluation and processing, ultimately to establish a visioning, kind of a guiding principle, ultimately to then answer a series of policy questions in due course. So again, this was what was highlighted in the draft staff report, and ultimately we will load that to the subcommittee webpage for the public to see in totality. But we'll be sending this little staff report and ultimately these questions to all the groups who we'll be engaging in, and Rob and I will be going through an experiential conversation with these groups of first off question we can all read together, but what do we believe is the reason for redesigning State Street downtown portion at this time? What are the motivating factors? What are the thoughts and inputs there? And then thereon, if State Street is redesigned in downtown, describe what is going on when you visit and what are you experiencing. These are obviously very open-ended, broad questions. We want to really get that wide range, full perspective of everyone in the community, all the commissions, all the stakeholder organizations in this regard. And so obviously all this will need to be grouped. This will be a far-ranging sets of inputs that we'll be getting. And then thirdly, what role does a redesigned State Street play in the revitalization of downtown? So we recognize this is a public space. It will serve a variety of purposes, but ultimately could also be leveraged in a broad sense supporting adjacent businesses, supporting future residents and housing in downtown, potentially engaging the waterfront, engaging the neighboring streets. So how does this all interact and work together? So those are kind of the direction and trajectory that we're starting to initiate, and we wanted to check in and get the feedback from the subcommittee today on these questions and thoughts. And then with that, I'll really open it up for question and discussion, and Mr. Dayton can join.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Do my colleagues have any questions to start? Mayor Pro Tem?
Madam Chair, I didn't have questions, but I did have a few discussion points, and I can hold off on those if we have public comment. Or
Yeah, why don't we wait and see if we have public comment, if that's okay. And Councilmember Gutierrez, please jump on if you have any questions. I just have a quick question myself. I'm hoping you can describe for us a little bit more the process of taking these questions to the boards and commissions. Will you be reaching out to them in advance to present these questions? And I ask that just because even reading them for myself, I feel like, wow, I'd really like to kind of ruminate on these. So I'm wondering if you could just share with us a little bit about how this works. I know you have a lot of experience doing it, Mr. Dayton, so thank you.
Yeah, Chair Harmon. So yeah, this is in the staff report, and we'll be working with each staff member. We've already committed to all the boards and commissions. I think they're all scheduled except for one that we showed you last time. I think we've scheduled 4 out of the 7 stakeholders already. And it's, as Mr. Harris said, it really is kind of a dialogue. So yes, the questions, they'll get it ahead of time. We really want them to think about it before they come to the meeting. And then how we handle it during the meeting is going to be a little different than what you experienced on the De La Guerra meeting, because we won't have the interviews ahead of time, but they'll be able to verbally process, and we'll try to guide it away from design. That's okay if people want to talk about it, but kind of more guided towards, what's your experience, so that we can really capture what that vision is. And then we will, once we produce the themes for your subcommittee, we'll send those all back to the people who participated, so they can see kind of the kitchen sink of the process, and how the themes were compiled, and what rises to the top are the strongest themes that are shared between all the stakeholders and commissions, and then mixed with the survey. So that'll be an interesting task for us to do, and I think it'll be really interesting for you all to see what that looks like when we get there.
Great, thank you. And then I know we've spoken about this, but just for the benefit of anyone that may be watching, can you describe a little bit the process of putting together the survey questions and how that's happening and where that is in terms of process? Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, that's a great question. So this is a taller order for us, and we none of us on the team are survey experts, but so we have a person who we've hired, who's what we're asking them to do, a professional surveyor, is to take our 3 questions, which are really getting at the why of the street, the vision of the street, and try to put that into something that's more multiple choice. And they're going to be considering whether or not they can have some inputs that are verbal, forget what he calls them, but the direct responses, and see if, because we're anticipating, we're hopefully going to get, our target is about 5,000 responses. We really want this to be rich and have the community really weigh in on these thoughts about experience. So the question in this survey professional's mind is going to be, can I have verbal responses along with multiple choice? Because after it's done, it's got to be condensed again into these themes. And so he's going to be focusing on how to do that. And then hopefully by the next meeting, we'll have a survey for you to look at based on what he comes up with.
Awesome, thank you very much. So if my colleagues don't have any questions at this point, we'll open it up to public comment. Ms. Perea, is there anyone who wishes to speak on this item?
Yes, we have multiple people with raised hands. So
Great.
We'll call on the first, which is Anna Gott. Anna Gott, go ahead and speak.
Good afternoon. I just want to remind you about some of the other comments I've made today, and it actually has to do with our issues with climate change. We're hearing and seeing other communities actually address this by reducing all of the commuting back and forth into cities. Now that we've got more experience with it, they're actually going to be mandating that people not bring anyone who can telework from home actually back into a commercial space every single day. They're only going to allow it a certain amount of a number of days. We really need to think about reducing the amount of commercial space that we have downtown. We've been told time and time again that we have too much commercial space, way too much. You know, the amount of tourists and even additional residents cannot support downtown. It is simply too big. And we have too many other areas of town that are being developed for tourists and for residents. It just doesn't make sense to have the amount that we've got as commercial space, and we really need to rethink that. I'd also like to remind you that we have design boards that are looking at the entire streetscape. And right now we have nothing but a visual blight on State Street. And if we are going to do anything permanent, all of these ugly parklets have to be removed and have to be replaced with something else, because they are just visually unappealing and they block all of the hard design work and the time that people spent trying to make sure that everything was designed for either the HLC or ABR guidelines. Regarding the questions that are being asked of individuals, we're not actually, I think, getting to a lot of people who are not visiting State Street, and we're not asking enough information about who exactly is filling out these particular online questionnaires, because a lot of people from the industry are filling out these questions. It's not the resident that lives here. It's the resident that makes it's the non-resident or the resident who makes their money off of design, building, or property. It's not the residents that actually go in and try shopping on State Street.
Thank you,
I
Ms.
just would like you to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Okay, next speaker is Cassandra Ensberg. Go ahead and unmute yourself, please. You've got 2 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for your committee that you have formed to focus on this, and appreciate your work in this regard. I'm just here to just remind you about the AIA and the community charrette that's been going on. I know you all know about it. I just wanted to pop in and just say, you know, we've received all of the a tremendous amount of amazing material that we're now going through and figuring out how is the best way to present it to you all. But I think you're going to be really, really excited to see all of the great ideas that have have come from the result of this work. And as of course you know, there was a survey done as part of that as well that had close to 5,000 responses, all focusing on the downtown area. So just to remind you, we're here, we're available, we are part of the community, we're very concerned and want to do the best we can to help our community move forward. So we are here as a resource and always available anytime, just reach out. So thank you again for your work, and we will look forward to sharing more information later. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ensberg. Next speaker, please.
Okay, next we have Tamara Erickson. Tamara Erickson, go ahead and unmute yourself, please. You've got 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you. Again, I'm Tamara Erickson with Hotel Santa Barbara. And I understand completely that communicating all of this during COVID is really difficult, and I appreciate all the work you've done. Looks like a lot has happened already. But I'd also like to just encourage you in your outreach. Mr. Harris mentioned stakeholder organizations being sought out. I'd like to encourage you to absolutely reach out to other stakeholder property owners, not just organizations. You know, we have 125 linear feet on State Street, and I really had to do some serious sleuthing to even find out that this group existed. And so it's nice to know what's going on, but a lot of people that are really impacted aren't aware. And I just agree that the more diverse response you get in your surveys and also in your stakeholder research will provide a better result if you get the voices of those with real-time experience downtown, as well as the designers, people that experience it and also have been downtown a long time. I think the ultimate project they end up with will be better, and you'll have fewer complaints from people like me in the long run. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Erickson. Next commenter, please, Ms. Bray.
Okay, next we have Richard Clausen. Richard Clausen, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Chair Harmon. I think it was earlier in this meeting, a commenter mentioned the AIA charrette and mentioned that it's
Mr. Clausen, I think we've lost you.
I think I may be back on now.
We'll start your time again. Thank you.
That's all right. I'll be brief. Thank you. I don't think I have to remind the subcommittee that your job is to create the vision for Santa Barbara. Despite what promoters of the AIA charrette would suggest that they are going to provide the vision, I think we had an experience like that several years ago that failed. I have looked at some of the materials already produced by the charrette, and I will just say in the briefest terms that they support the adage that when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And developers and the AIA and architects are developers, and they are looking for opportunities to develop. And so that's what their vision is. And I would hope, and I think the public fully expects, that the subcommittee's view of what the vision shall be for State Street is broader than simply the built environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. Another commenter, Ms. Perea?
No, there are no more speakers.
Great, thank you very much. Well, that closes public comment for this item, and I don't believe we're taking any formal action today, though I could be wrong on this item. So I'll open it up to my colleagues for comments. I think Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon, you had comments to start?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just in some of the just very minor comments first in the wording of some of the questions. I think in the staff memo draft, I would change the word foregone to favorable. I don't know if I'm gonna know if we have that in front of us here. But it makes a reference to while it was controversial, now many residents see it as a foregone outcome, and I would just change that to a favorable outcome. I think we want to be very careful not to have wording that suggests that these decisions are already made, because they are not. Okay, thank you. And then when we talk about revitalization, and this is maybe something I look for feedback on, but I might change the word revitalization to vitality, to just what we want for the vitality of State Street. I mean, I think if we're constantly in this cycle of waiting, it kind of gives the impression of waiting until something's run down and dead before you revitalize it. And I think we're just looking at vitality all the way through. And then I just, I'm so appreciative that we've changed the focus to what are people's experiences of State Street. But I think now I've maybe pushed that too far, and I think it is good to look at what are the goals, what would be the goal of the street. And I think we do need to do sort of deliberate outreach to businesses. So what do they see as the challenges with the promenade if we go that direction? What do they see as opportunities? And how might we use that input to inform us? I mean, we need the businesses to do well, to want people to want to go there, and it's a symbiotic. So I think that maybe it's slightly different questions for the businesses, the property owners, really highlighting what are your concerns with this, and then maybe we can be addressing that when we're looking long term instead of trying to patch it up later. And that might be just a different set of questions. But I really like the, you know, how do you experience State Street? I think someone doesn't have their microphone muted. How we're experiencing State Street. And why now, and then changing that to the, you know, the long-term vitality. And then, sorry, I had one more question in there. Oh, I think we had from previous meeting, the specific question of if you're not a visitor to State Street, what would bring you to State Street? Just very overtly that. We have a good many residents who just don't go to State Street. And I think it would be a great opportunity to get at why not? And what could we do to make that, you know, if there's something we could do to make that more welcoming and inviting, I think that would be good to look at. I think those are my main comments on that, but I would include a little bit about the goals. You know, what is the goal for any particular respondent? You know, what is your goal for State Street? And for businesses, it'll be different. For hotels, it'll be different. Visitor centers, and kind of making sure we integrate that as well. But other than that, I think I'm very happy we're doing the outreach to as many as possible, and I favor the direction.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Those are great comments. Councilmember Gutierrez?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry. Madam Chair. Yeah, no, this all sounds good to me, and I really appreciate city staff and all the stakeholders being willing to work with us to try to move State Street and our community overall into the future.
Thank you, Councilmember Gutierrez. And I just have one quick follow-up question. One of the stakeholder groups that we had identified originally, and this is in response to many of the public comments and what my colleagues have said, was, or is rather, property owners, right? So we're specifically going to be engaging, and to Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon's point of maybe drafting questions for them. I just want to confirm that is part of this process, correct? If I'm remembering that correctly?
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I will third my colleagues' comments. Really excited about this. Agree wholeheartedly with the recommendations made by Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon, and really appreciate the work that you guys are doing to move forward this conversation. So unless from staff or my colleagues there are any other comments, I think that we can close this meeting with thanks and looking forward to coming back again in 2 weeks and to keeping this conversation moving forward.
Madam Chair, I'll just call your attention. We have public comment on this item, C, before we adjourn.
Didn't we do public comment on this?
Oh, you're correct. I apologize.
All right. Well, though I'm always open to more. If there's anyone else who wants to make a closing comment, Ms. Perea, does anyone have their hand up?
No.
All right. Better safe than sorry. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and looking forward to this continued conversation. Everybody have a great week. This meeting's adjourned.